carved a place in the history of Canada's nation. The famous five changed the face of our land. They were born in a time that seemed so benign, when ladies were seen but not heard, fair of face and in their place, when meekness was mostly preferred. The five looked around, and everywhere they found the world revolved around men. They said we must fight what is not right, no matter who we may offend. Five women united, and united were strong. Five women said, now we've begun. They rallied the nation for all generations and fought till the battle was won. Women wanted a voice and a say in the choice of the matters affecting our land. They didn't believe they shouldn't achieve every right freely given to men. So arm in arm from the cities and farms, their voices joined and were heard. Hand in hand, the women of this land fought the fights, won the rights they deserved. Five women united, and united were strong. Five women said, now we've begun. They rallied the nation for all generations and fought till the battle was won. And fought till the battle was won. Emily Murphy, Henrietta Edwards, Louise McKinney, Irene Harleby, and Nellie McClung. Heroes of mine, the famous five.
Thank you very much for joining us today for the virtual Pink Tea on a famous Friday, a day when women are more powerful and see more opportunities. So please see them. Please feel equal to high and splendid braveries like the famous five admonished us to do. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today, and a happy new year. I have a feeling 2022 is going to be a spectacular year for women. So please dream big and take action. On behalf of the Famous Five Foundation, we are thrilled with the panel that we have for you today. And we hope that you will continue to chat in the chat room and also join us after the virtual Pink Tea for our après Pink Tea. And this is a chance for you to speak directly to some of the program participants and also to one another, and perhaps to some of the Famous Five directors as well. You'll get a special link to the après Pink Tea in your inbox in just a moment, just before the end of the Pink Tea, so not in just a moment. And our thanks to singer-songwriter Carolyn Harley for her magnificent ballad of the Famous Five. She's also written Spirit of the Famous Five, which we'll hear at another virtual Pink Tea. So many of Canada's important female leaders are now our Indigenous sisters. It's such an exciting development. And we honor them and their ancestors who have taken care of Canada for many, many years through the land acknowledgement. So by doing a land acknowledgement, we honor the history of North America, of its original peoples, and present our commitment to do our bit, our part for reconciliation. So today, we say thank you to the Indigenous sisters and the brothers who have cared for Canada and who are carrying on caring for Canada. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of their ancestors, of our ancestors. So thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to thank the major sponsors of these virtual teas, to our colleague for 20 years, Enbridge, to Suncor, and also to Haskayne School of Business and the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Calgary. As well, we thank the other sponsors who have become our partners. And of course, we're always looking for new sponsors, so please join us. Today's spokesperson from Enbridge is Amanda Alfonso. She is the strategist for public affairs. Let me just read this so I get it right. She's the strategist for external affairs, public affairs, communications, and sustainability at Enbridge. Clearly a major asset there, and a major asset for Calgary, because amongst her many volunteer duties, she is the president of the Parkdale Community Association. And last year, she launched the very first truly accessible hockey rink in Alberta, and only the second in Canada. So thank you very much, Amanda, for what you do on the job and also in your volunteer activities. And now I would like to call upon you to introduce our remarkable panel, and I'll be back with you all a little later.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here today on behalf of Enbridge. Enbridge is in the business of delivering the energy that fuels our lives, whether it's heating our homes, powering industries, or fueling our cars. Enbridge is an integral part of everyone's daily life, and there's nothing that matters to us more than safe, vibrant, and sustainable communities. At Enbridge, we empower and encourage our employees to model inclusive behaviors and respect that our people have diverse backgrounds and perspectives, much like the distinct populations in the over 10,000 communities, including Indigenous groups in North America where we operate. We demonstrate our commitment to diversity and equity by partnering with organizations that provide the opportunity to build connections with diverse groups. The Famous Five Foundation is one of our valued partners, and we've been a proud supporter for nearly 20 years. We wholeheartedly support the Foundation's vision to champion the development and recognition of Canada's female leaders. Over the past 152 years, Canada has had 289 premiers. How many of them have been women? 14. How many do we have today? 2 out of 13 premiers. They are Premier Caroline Cochran of the Northwest Territories and Premier Heather Steffensen of Manitoba. One of our VIP guests today is British Columbia's 35th Premier, the Honourable Christy Clark, the second woman to serve as Premier of British Columbia and the first female Premier in Canada to lead her party to 2 consecutive elections. Following a slight electoral defeat and her resignation in 2017, the Honourable Christy Clark joined the law firm Bennett Jones as senior advisor. As well, she serves on a number of key corporate and community boards. Our second VIP speaker today is Premier Caroline Cochran of the Northwest Territories. This Métis leader has served her community as a social worker and a member of the legislature for many years. In addition to her duties as Premier, she also carries responsibilities for reconciliation and managing the territory's COVID response. We know much more about our female premiers thanks to University of Western Ontario's Professor of Political Science, Dr. Kate Graham. She launched her best-selling book called Govern Like a Girl last spring. This fascinating book looks at the trailblazing women who rose to the top as first ministers in Canada and includes Canada's only female Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Kim Campbell, who was with us last year at this time. Dr. Graham chronicles their early life and the key issues which propelled them into politics. Professor Graham not only teaches and researches politics academically, she is seeking election as an MPP in London, Ontario, in the upcoming Ontario spring election. Good luck, Dr. Graham, and now over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Well, this is characteristic of 2022. We are all rolling with it as we connect on these new platforms, and I'm just delighted to be here for this conversation today. Thank you so much to Frances and the Famous Five Foundation team for putting together this terrific event. I share your optimism, Frances, about 2022 being a year where we really focus on gender equity in Canada, and I think conversations like this are an important part of that. So I'm delighted today to be joined by two of Canada's 14 women who have reached our most senior political post as Premier, Premier Carolyn Cochran from the Northwest Territories and former British Columbia Premier Christy Clark. Hello to both of you. It's a real treat to get to see you again. Now, I've had the privilege of getting to know both of you. I've interviewed both of you. You're both featured in the No Second Chances podcast and the book Govern Like a Girl. But there may be people at this event today who haven't had the privilege yet of getting to know you. So I'm wondering if each of you could speak for just a few moments to introduce yourself to the group. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you care about, and what led you to pursue political leadership. And perhaps we'll start with Premier Carolyn Cochran. Hello, Premier.
Good afternoon, Kate, depending on which part of the country, and I assume some of you might be good morning. Politics, what led me to get into here? I think my background is a little bit different than most people. I came from a place of poverty. I came from a place of large families, Indigenous background, and just not the usual strain. So I spent my life working in the NGO world. I was excited to hear that social work students were on here. I went back as an adult in my 30s with 2 children as a single mom and got a degree in social work and worked for 20 years with homeless people and low-income families and just felt I was banging my head against the wall constantly. So elections came up. I had seen a workshop on how to run for politics. So I decided to take that and been going forward ever since. So again, my biggest thing is that none of us come from the same background. There may be similarities, but we're all different people and all of us deserve a voice at the table. So it's not only women, it's every different diversity in Canada needs to be able to have a voice at the table. So thank you, Kate.
Okay, terrific. And Christy Clark, hello, great to see you again. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you care about, and what led you to pursue a path in politics.
Thank you, Kate, very much, and thanks to the Famous Five for having us. It's a real honor to be here with Carolyn. Because we've never met. She and I have never met in person before, or even online. So I was the Premier of British Columbia for 6.5 years. I'm the only woman ever elected Premier of our province. And the only one since as well. And what brought me into politics was really, I had an upbringing where my dad was a school teacher, my mom was active in the daycare movement. They were both she was volunteering, and they were both always giving back to the community. So they were always helping people. It was kind of I came from a household of helpers, I guess. And both of them really believed, as I do, that you can change the world around you, that if you don't do it, who's going to do it? And why should you decide that everybody else has the responsibility to make the world better and not you? So I was naturally drawn to doing things that were about helping, I think. And it did seem to me when I went to university that politics was probably one of the best ways to have the most influence in changing the world around us. And so I went into politics, and I guess if you ask me what I really care about, one of the reasons I'm here today is I care very much about women being treated equally and fairly in Canada, and I don't believe that we are. I care very much about changing the messages that young women in particular and older women get about what's possible for us and what we're capable of doing. And I care very much, as Carolyn does, I'm sure, about lifting people up out of poverty, out of places in their lives that are difficult, and helping them live with dignity and be fully able to participate in our society. And, my experience 6.5 years as Premier, I really feel like we've got a chance to do a lot of that. I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, Kate, but I really hope that every woman listening and girl listening to this, us today, at the end of this decides, you know, maybe running for office is something I could do after all.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about your own experiences overcoming barriers. So we know that there are many things that keep all people from seeking leadership roles, but this is particularly true for women. And of course, it's particularly true for women who also experience other barriers. And but you, the both of you, have been able to overcome these. You've reached a position that only 14 women in all of Canada's history have. So I'm wondering if you could share a story or two with us. What's a barrier that you have experienced and how did you overcome it? And this time, perhaps we'll start with you, Premier Clark.
Well, I mean, when I was running for leader of the BC Liberal Party, we were 20 points behind in the polls. The front page of the newspaper, the day before the election, had a picture of the leader of the NDP, which was the party we were running against, on the front page of the paper with the headline, "This man could kick a dog and still get elected." I went through 2 years of everybody believing I was a dead loser. And, you know, it taught me a lot about character to get up every morning and go into the bathroom, put my makeup on every day and think, what am I doing this for? And, you know, I would say, you know, that long period of 2 years of having to every day tell myself that I was capable of doing it, that I was confident in myself, that I was going to do it no matter what anybody said. And if I lost, that was okay. I was going to feel good about having done my best effort. That really profoundly changed me forever because it taught me that other people's expectations, you know, even though I always thought, oh, gee, I'm not a victim of what other people think. I was, but it really freed me from that. And it freed me from believing that what other people think about me is true because I found a sense, I gained knowledge about myself. And I think in a lot of ways, freed myself from the 45 years before that all women get, where we grow up with everybody in 1,000 different ways telling us we just aren't good enough.
Very inspiring, and I think a lot of people, unfortunately, can relate to that. Premier Cochran, you shared a little bit already in your introduction, but would love to hear more from you about barriers that you have overcome. What were those barriers in your way? How were you able to get around them?
Thanks, Kate. I think the first barrier for me was when I decided to run for election was getting myself known. It's very important that you have some kind of community recognition when you run for politics, especially if you're running against somebody who's already in the seat. And I spent 20 years dishing up soup to homeless people. I never attended a gala in my life. So it was really difficult when I was dealing with the incumbent that had been going to galas, that came from a place of privilege with quite a substantial financial background and knew all the business people and had the connections. So that was the first barrier, was to be able to make sure that people respected that not everyone that doesn't come from financial background, that not everyone that doesn't attend galas still deserves a place, still understands some of the issues. And in my opinion, sometimes more so, because when you're on the ground, right at the bottom of the ground, you sometimes see the realities that people are dealing with. So the second problem I had was confidence. My background, I dropped out of high school when I was in grade 9. And when I had my second child, I decided to go back to get a degree and further my education. So that was a stumbling block for myself personally, getting over my own confidence and recognizing that I deserve to be here. Many people will tell you don't need to be here. When you get elected, you'll have at least half the people out there that are saying, take off her head. She doesn't need to be there. Women can't rule, can't be leaders. So it took a lot of confidence building to be able to do that. The biggest driving force for me, many times, as Premier Clark stated, that I doubted myself and thought, what am I doing here? People love me in the NGO world. Why don't I go back there? but it was my team, a team of women behind me that kept pushing me and saying, we need you there. You represent all of us. And so that kept me going right throughout it. So I think, again, because challenges are our own stumbling blocks, but challenges are hills to get over. They're not walls. And so recognizing that where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, emphasize on your strengths, but look at your weaknesses and see the strategies that you can use to overcome that is my advice. Thank you, Kate.
Well, I really appreciate the honesty in both of your answers, and there's certainly a lot of similarity in your answers as well. That this is hard. Like it's Christy, in your words, hard to get up and put on your makeup every day and keep going, even with all these obstacles in your way. Premier Cochran, the same thing. I'm sure there were many moments where both of you thought, there are easier things I could do with my time and my talent. But we're so glad that you continued to push on. With more than 300 First Ministers in Canada, the fact that there's only been 14, unfortunately, it means even for people where it is harder, we need you to keep pushing. So thank you for being willing to rise above the obstacles that were in your way. So we're now going to hear from the newest woman at the table, so to speak. Premier Heather Steffensen was recently elected in Manitoba. For a time, we had no female premiers in Canada. About 2 years ago, we had one of those moments. And then, of course, Premier Cochran, you were elected. You were the sole woman at the table, and now there are two of you. So we'll turn now to a video from the new Premier of Manitoba, Heather Steffensen.
I think the best thing about being the first female Premier is simply the opportunity to serve the people of Manitoba. I know that many people are struggling right now. They may have lost a job or a business or a loved one due to this terrible pandemic. The people of Manitoba have trusted me to represent them during this challenging time, and it is the honor of my life to fight for their families and their livelihoods as Premier. Listening to their stories and working for them is what keeps me going every single day. And as a woman, the greatest thing about being Premier is listening to women like you. It's so wonderful to see so many young women aspire to this office and to leadership roles where they have the opportunity to serve their communities. And I want to thank the Famous Five Foundation for hosting this event and providing that opportunity to women and girls throughout Canada. Thank you.
Okay, so nice to get to see the new Premier of Manitoba, perhaps a fresh face for many, and great to see that she's joined you at the Council of Federation tables, Premier Cochran. So I'm wondering if both of you could speak a bit about how do we change the political climate in Canada so that we can see more women lead. And I'll just add a little bit more context to the question. So we know that unconscious bias is still a very real part of our political culture. We know that female leaders are evaluated differently than we evaluate male leaders. Of course, this is even more so when women come from racialized backgrounds, when women are younger or older, or have disabilities or any number of other circumstances. And so how do we change those expectations so that the climate is not so difficult and we start to see more women rising up to leadership roles naturally? What do we need to do to make that change? And Premier Clark, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I think probably the most important thing is some of the stuff that you've been doing, Kate. You've got your book out, Lead Like a Girl. And, if that finds its way into every school library in Canada, that'll be amazing. Because what we need is women to see more women leading, and we need to normalize this. We grow up as women, as young women, as girls, with low expectations. And it's amazing, kind of people will say, oh my goodness, look at what he did. And with a girl, well, I never really expected her to be able to do it. And that follows us through the rest of our lives. And so I think, it's something that is internalized, that we internalize as well. So women often don't want to run for office because we have a level of self-doubt that men just do not possess. And, my tried and true story, and this is the absolute truth, because I've talked to hundreds of women to try and get them to run. I talked to big groups of women to try and get them to run. And when they start really thinking about it, they say, oh, but Christy, I don't know all the policies. I haven't read the platform. And you know what? The guys never read the platform. They don't know all the policies. If somebody asks them a question they don't know the answer to, you know what they do? They make it up. But we, because of the way we are raised in a sexist society with gender bias working against us every step of the way, always believe we need to know the answer for everything. Because if we're not proven to be perfect, we'll be counted out. And that's been our experience in life. So the first thing I say to women is, look, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You don't, just take the advantages that men have as though we're all equal in this society. And then I think what we need to do is we need to somehow persuade, cajole, trick more women into running and helping them get elected, working for them. And as Carolyn said, like she had a lot of women supporting her, I had a lot of women supporting me, men too, but we need to get women in the forefront so that it is totally normal. And and when it's normal and you see half the people doing it are women, the standards for women will, I think, become closer to those of men. And that'll trickle down. And we'll see more women running for office and more women thinking that it's possible for them, because it doesn't seem like a weird thing to do anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that normalization is so powerful, and why, again, I think discussions like this are important. We need more Canadians to know the two of you and to know your colleagues who've been able to reach these roles, so that it does become more normal to see women leading. And again, I appreciate your comments about that pressure to be perfect. I'm the mom of a 17-month-old daughter, and it's unbelievable how quick the influences are in TV shows and media around that, particularly that we place on girls. So thanks for a thoughtful and insightful answer as always. Premier Cochran, what's your sense on how we change this climate, how we create a political culture where we do naturally see more women and a greater diversity of women leading?
So I agree with Premier Clark in saying that we have to start when people are young, when children are in school. We need to change our history books. We need to change a lot of history books based on reconciliation at this point too. But in regards to women's roles, and each person needs to challenge themselves as well, because often I find that it's not only, we keep talking about society having roles for women, and I find that men definitely have roles for women, but sometimes women do as well. And sometimes we allow the comments that are made about women's roles to go unchallenged. So I think that part of that is being politically correct, challenging when you can, if you can be politically correct with that, but challenging the stereotypes, the norms, because it certainly doesn't help us as women when we allow them to keep being vocalized. I always say racism exists. It's but when it's thrown in your face, previous elections comes to my mind right away. When it's thrown in your face, it becomes center stage. But when you ignore it, that's when it festers. That's when it allows to become an infection. So challenging ourselves within that and supporting each other as women. Again, I wouldn't have ran if I didn't have a whole team of women behind me that said, we need you there. We need your voice there. So, and they kept me strong all the way. At the same time, I had a team of women helping me. I also had a few women on the outskirts that were really against me because I wasn't at galas, I wasn't knowledgeable, I wasn't who they thought I should be to be in. So, that took a toll on me as well, having to figure out how to manage that. We're hard on ourselves as individuals, we're hard on ourselves as women, but it's time that we look at internally as well and see how we can support each other as women in all kinds of leadership roles and challenge the stereotypes that are out there. It's not okay to sit by and listen or even to laugh. It's better to be kind, but challenge would be my advice.
Well, I appreciate the very clear call to action there. And that's something that, all of us who aspire towards a more equitable Canada, those are really concrete things that each and every one of us can do in our day-to-day lives. Calling out racism, calling out gender bias, calling out sexism and misogyny, and also supporting the people who don't fit the prototype that so many of our leaders have been committed into supporting them in every way so that they can start to change the perception of what a leader looks like in Canada. Okay, so we now have 2 questions from 2 students. These are students from West Island College in Calgary, and they each have a question for you. So I will turn it over first to Agam, and we'll go from there. So welcome, Agam.
You had the honor of being the 2nd female premier of beautiful British Columbia. From where do you derive motivation and energy to maintain such a high degree of leadership? If travels bring you to Calgary, I'd look forward to meeting you.
Okay, so I share Agam's question. Where do you get the motivation and energy to maintain such a high degree of leadership? Where does that come from? Premier Cochran, maybe you can start us off on this one. Where do you draw that from?
The first source of energy that I get is remembering the purpose that I came from for. COVID hit hard. I was just elected, and it wasn't even 3 months and COVID hit. And everybody across the world was worried about, are we going to live or die through this? And then the pressures came, battling a health endemic, or now an endemic, but battling it. And half the people thinking you need to tighten everything down, and half the people thinking you need to open everything up. So it was a real controversy. So the motivation that keeps me here, because you take a lot of beating when people aren't happy. The motivation that keeps me here is remembering that I came because of low-income people. I came because of homeless people, and the pandemic laid bare the gaps in society and the struggles that people that don't have money and people that are homeless face. So remembering my cause, remembering what I came for, kept me strong throughout all the personal beatings that I took on the road to where I am now. The other thing that keeps me motivated is my team. If you think that you're going to be a leader and you have all the answers, you're going to be pulled down pretty quickly. And so you should be. The strongest leader, in my opinion, is the one that uses a team, that when you don't have the answers, because you won't have the answers to everything, as Christy said, is being able to draw on your team and being able to get as much advice around the table as possible before you make an informed decision would be my recommendation. So thank you, Kate.
Great answer. Premier Clark.
Well, I think Premier Cochran nailed it when she said you need to remember what you came for, why you're there, for sure. I mean, that's always going to be a source of inspiration, of momentum for you. And, you know, for me, it was really making sure that families had, you know, however you define a family, there's lots of different ways to think about that, but that families were on a good foundation, particularly because I think a lot about how this next generation, how young people, how children are going to grow up to be healthy, whole, you know, fulfilled human beings. And I just think, you know, there's so much brokenness in families. People really struggle income-wise and with other issues. And, you know, government is there to try and support that through its economic policies, creating economic growth, creating opportunity and jobs, through training and education and the social services that we provide. So really, government is where that happens. And but you know, on a day-to-day basis, for me, I mean, the journalists call it retail politics, but for me, going out there and just meeting people, sitting in coffee shops and talking, and you know, there's no camera there to see what you're talking about, but just politics is this privilege of being able to get into people's lives and have people be truly, profoundly, authentically honest with you about what's going on in their lives and maybe why they're happy, more often why they're mad. And to me, that was an incredible privilege. And hearing from thousands and thousands of people every year directly always was the biggest motivator I had, because I could really connect the day-to-day work that government does in the capital city with all the bureaucrats and everybody comfortable, and you know, everybody's making a good living, with the person who's living in Fort St. John, Quesnel, Prince Rupert, you know, Vancouver Island, Kelowna, you name it, who were just, you know, who didn't have the same privileges that we all did. So that was the best, I would say, probably the most fun part of it, but it was also the most moving and meaningful and motivating part of it.
Well, you're both clearly have chosen the right path. I think a lot of people, when, you know, imagining Premier Cochrane, you talked about having to make decisions about lockdowns and what's open and what's closed, and half the people always being upset with you. And, any number of political issues can really divide a community. And I'm glad to hear that you both find strength and motivation and inspiration in talking to people, even when they're upset, even when they have divided opinions. Sometimes I'm sure they're mad at you, at your government, at things going on around them. But even still, democracy is really about people having the ability to express what they care about and have those expressions matter. So great to hear that has been a source of inspiration and motivation for both of you. And great question, Agam. Thank you very much for asking that. Okay, a second question, again from a student at West Island College in Calgary. I'd like to introduce you to Medina.
I believe that joining organizations helps the community at large and is a very important part in society. So what factors made you choose the organizations that you did? Merci de m'avoir écouté.
Okay, so Premier Clark, maybe we will start with you. Medina's question about how do you choose what organizations to join? If you want to grow your leadership skills, how do you make those kinds of choices?
Well, I think you want to narrow it down first to something you care about, because it's hard to stay motivated in an organization when you're really not that interested in what they're doing. So, but I do find that for most people, they're interested in a whole bunch of different things. And so, for some people, it's a little harder than others. So they may have, but always find something you're interested in at the very least. There are lots of other good reasons to do it, though. I mean, you may have personal experience with something you want to change specifically, something that's, where there's an individual you want to help specifically. But there's other reasons too. For example, you might really like, or want to learn from the people who are running the organization. That's a great opportunity to see how leadership works, to get some mentorship and some training in leadership and how to build an organization. And you might just like the people who are there. They might be fun people to be with. And one of the great things about joining an organization, especially a political one, is those people can become the best friends you'll ever have. And for me, the people that I was in the Young Liberal Club with at university are still my very best friends, and many of them went on to work with me directly in government. And those are the most profound friendships that I've ever made in my life. So friends that you like, leaders that you admire, and causes that you care about. I would say those are three good reasons, each one perhaps a different measure, depending on what you want to do.
Okay, great. Premier Cochran, how about you? How have you been able to navigate making these choices?
I like to say ditto, but I don't think that's politically correct. So what I did say, and Nadina, is I did see behind your door a sign that said love. So I always believe I grabbed that right away and love whatever you do. Not everything you do in life will have ups and downs. There's not one position or job or role that you will take that is just pure love. Even if you do something like artistic craft, drawing something, you'll still have those moments of frustration in life. That's part of life. But love what you do in general. Make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks is always, or the detriments is what I always, when I counsel people in my old profession as a social worker, that's what I always told people. And pick the causes. People often think that leadership has to be at a high level to learn the skills. You have to be an executive director of an NGO or part of a political party or a head of a business organization. That's not necessarily true. You can learn leadership skills wherever you are. Whatever position people have in life, they don't realize. And I've been administrator for many, many years, but when I'm looking at people to promote, it's not just the people that are highest on the ranks. I look at the stars within the agency. So if you love the job that you're doing and you shine at it, you do the best you can, believe me, that opportunities will come to you. And like I said, leadership isn't just about being the boss. It's the leader of every position, every role that you decide to take in life, whatever you decide to do. It's you can either be a follower. I used to tell my children all the time, especially when they were young teens, and I was worried about their habits. You can either be a follower or you can be a leader. And that comes through every area in life as you go forward. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Medina, thank you very much for a thoughtful and insightful question. Really appreciate that. Okay, so we find ourselves in an unusual moment as Canada, as the world, where we're facing a whole number of unprecedented challenges, converging crises, as we often say. And for many people, I'd say myself included, the pandemic has really revealed some of the inequities in the world around us. Things that we always knew were there, but it's been especially apparent as we go through these difficult times that we see just how divided and inequitable our society and our world has become. So I'm wondering if each of you could speak about some priorities that you may have when it comes to emerging from this pandemic, emerging through these crises, and building the more equitable country that I think Canada likes to believe that we are, and many of us share a goal to become a more equitable place. So what are some of the things, we're sitting here in January 2022, that you believe are most important as we come out of this pandemic, we hope, and build a more equitable country? And Premier Cochran, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Kate. Well, again, when I came into politics, it was because of low-income families. It was because of people that weren't receiving the services and policies that they needed to be able to flourish in life. So when the pandemic hit, it laid bare. We had people worried about what do we do with homeless people now? Where do we put them when they get COVID? It laid bare the needs for women, the childcare providers being no centers being open because of closures, and so the whole economy having to not completely close down, but certainly taking a hit when women were taken out of the workforce because, again, women tend to be the major caregivers, so having to stay home with that. It showed bare the discrepancies between people of color and people of Caucasian, especially in the Northwest Territories, mostly Indigenous. When I speak that. We didn't have the healthcare centers. We didn't have the capacity to even deal with. We had just a couple of respirators in our whole arsenal of support. So it laid bare the discrepancies between all kinds of nations. And so policies that we're doing when we talk about our economic and our recovery from the pandemic, a lot of jurisdictions talk about economic recovery, and I take a hit a lot in the public about what are you doing for the economy to bring it back. But it's not only economic development, it's economic and social development that we need to do. And so our policies, our Emerging Stronger document to help us through this pandemic now is based on not only about what can we do for businesses to support them so people have jobs and businesses flourish, but what can we do for people? Because if people don't have the services they need, we will always be in a place where people are just not getting what they need. And so we have to, if people are happy and have the services they need, then they'll be able to actualize where they should be in life. And so we have to look at that too. So there's a combination. Thank you.
Okay, an ambitious list. Great. Premier Clark, what would be your priorities as we emerge from this pandemic and try to build a more equitable Canada?
Well, I think the urgent issue of reconciliation is something that's with First Nations and Indigenous people is something we've all got to face up to in Canada, and I feel like we're really starting to make some progress around that. And for me, that reconciliation begins with economic reconciliation. We need to address poverty in First Nations communities before we're going to be able to address all of the other consequences of poverty that are so endemic in Indigenous and First Nations communities. So I would say the first one is reconciling with First Nations and Indigenous people, in particular, thinking about the role of First Nations women in communities, which is, women are even, just like in society at large, Indigenous women are worse off than Indigenous men in Canada by quite a long shot. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is we do need to be, we need to be worried about economic inequity. We need to be thinking about how do we help people who are below the poverty line or kind of in the, kind of just above it, work their way into the middle class. How do we really accomplish that in this country? And I don't feel like we've been successful in changing that profile. In fact, economic inequality is worse now than it has been in the past. And the third thing is childcare. Now, childcare, Kate, is intimately related to the fact, to whether or not we're going to have any money to pay for it. And, I'm really angry that it's taken so long for a childcare plan to get put together in Ottawa, kind of at the tail end of this massive spending spree, when we're probably not going to get a chance to actually do it. So the idea is there, the will is there, and wait a minute, the feds have run out of money. So I have to say I'm a little bit, I'm pretty vexed about that, because we need women to be get a fair shake in the workforce, and it's very difficult if we don't. And the last thing I would say is there is, related to that, generational equity. And if Canada's debt continues to rise, if we can no longer get and our credit rating continues to kind of look tenuous, and we can no longer borrow money at the rates that we have, we are going to pass on a massive debt and very few assets to our children. And so, in addition to economic equality today, we need to be really thinking hard about the inequity and the injustice that we are doing to our children and our grandchildren in leaving them a country that really isn't able to afford the services that we've all come to depend on, and that I would argue define Canada.
Okay, well, thank you both so much from both of you. Quite a list of things that we as Canadians need to be thinking about and paying attention to. So very much appreciate that. And I know we are getting towards the end of our time here, and I see Frances has joined us on screen again. So Frances, welcome back, and thank you very much for your work in making this conversation possible today. I'll pass it back to you.
Well, our pleasure for sure. And what occurs to me is that we have two prime ministers in waiting from the two premiers that we have today. They would be excellent prime ministers, and that we have a premier in waiting as well. So this has been an extraordinarily informative and inspiring virtual Pink Tea. Couldn't ask for anything more. Well, yes, I could. I need to ask our three panelists for their rapid fire answer, just 2 or 3 words to these quick questions, please, because they help us when we are feeling confused or sad or afraid. So the first question is, when I'm confused, I ... So Premier Cochran, when you are confused, you...
Seek clarity.
Thank you. Christy Clark?
I go back to my first principles and see if it's consistent with my core beliefs.
Ah, a very good answer too. And of course, Kate.
Sleep on
when
it.
You're confused, you?
Sleep on it. Give it some time to think.
So when I'm scared, and we've only had one VIP guest say she's never scared, Beverly McLaughlin, which was interesting. But Premier Cochran, when you're scared, ... you...
I just spent 1 second, is that my partner works on the ice road all winter long, and so I do have moments when I'm alone and I do get afraid. So it's self-talk. It's "you got this," is what I use when I'm afraid.
Oh, how nice. Premier Clark, when you're scared, you...
I remember that fear is suffering, and fear is something we always should just leave behind.
Leave behind, interesting. Kate, what do you do when you're scared?
This is a less impressive answer than the other two, but I call my parents.
Yeah, someone to help you through it, right?
Yes.
Good. And when you're sad, what do you do? Premier Cochran?
I do what people say is not okay to do. I cry when I'm sad. And I think that's a strength, to be able to cry and to be able to release the emotions and then move forward.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent answer. Christy, when you're sad?
I cry, and I go find somebody I love and get a big hug.
Yeah. Or give somebody a big hug, right? I'm sure you do that lots. And Kate, what do you do when you're sad?
What came to my mind was the exact same thing. Let it go, cry, and hold on to my little girl. Big hug to my little baby.
Wow. So the last question is, if the famous five were alive today, they would ... Premier Cochran, what would they do if they were alive today?
I think if the famous five were alive today, they would have kept going from 1960 with the rights of women to vote to 1965 when Indigenous women got the right to vote. They would keep the cause going because they brought forward the right for women as a whole, but there's still lots of work to do for women of diversity, and that's a cause that's close to my heart.
Excellent. Premier Clark, if the famous five were alive today?
They would recognize that this fight is far from over for women of all creeds and backgrounds and colors and economic position. This fight is far from over, and we need as women to stay focused on making sure we win it.
Yeah. Kate, what would you like to see the famous five do if they were alive today?
A similar answer. I think they would be continuing the fight. I think they would also be quite discouraged with the lack of progress that we've made. You know, it's 2022. We've still never seen a woman of color hold the title of First Minister in Canada. There are still many, many important firsts that have not yet been broken. And honestly, I'd feel a little embarrassed talking to them that we haven't progressed further since the work that they did.
Personal responsibility. Yes, and I'm sure they would also apologize for some of the beliefs that they had at that time, but they didn't know then what we know now, and they still may hold some of those beliefs. Shame on them. Anyway, we apologize for their beliefs that were racist, as most Canadians were at that time, or inappropriate, but they did bring suffrage enfranchisement to Canadian women and then opened the doors to power with the Senate as well. So pretty substantial achievement. So now it's time for our toasts. And because friends, we're at a tea party, and you know the history of the pink teas, but we're at a tea party where women gather together and talk about their lives and share some of their problems and hopefully some of the solutions to problems as well. We're going to toast with our cup of tea or our mug. So if you've got your cup of tea ready, we'll begin the toast, first of all, with, and I love Premier Cochran's mug, but Premier Cochran, put your mug down, please, because we're going to toast you first, since you are a current serving political leader. So in addition to the incredible leadership that you are providing and the wonderful information and encouragement and inspiration you provided for people today, thank you very much too for the 20 plus years that you have spent advocating for people who do not have necessarily the power or the access or the knowledge about how to do so. You have significantly improved housing in the Northwest Territories, and on a number of other issues too, you have been a leader. So a heartfelt toast of appreciation to Premier Cochran. So we'll raise our mugs to Premier Cochran. Thank you very, very much. And now to former Premier Christy Clark, who still obviously has the fire in her belly, which is so exciting to see and hear, because hopefully it means, you know, more national leadership. Thank you very much for the contributions that you have made and for your inspiring participation today. We hope that you will continue to speak out on the issues that you are so passionate about. Your passion definitely came through, and that's such an important part of leadership, so you're not dissuaded by naysayers, and there will always be naysayers. So over, under, through, pause, whatever, but we keep our eye on the prize. So a toast of gratitude to the energetic former Premier of BC, to Christy Clark. Christy Clark.
Christy Clark.
And completing this important panel was the author and the university professor from the University of Western Ontario, Kate Graham. how easily you conducted this discussion, Kate. It's clear that you really know and understand politics and the special aspects of these women who have been our political leaders. And Kate has also arranged for one of her poli-sci classes to attend today, so that's another reason for us to say thank you to Kate Graham. So to Kate Graham,
Kate.
thank you very much. And I would like to show you her book, what we have talked about, Govern Like a Girl. Am I doing this right? I'm never quite sure. Govern Like a Girl.
You got it.
You got it? Okay. So it's available from Second Story Press right now with a 15% discount. Or you can pay full price, and it's worth every cent, at any of the other bookstores that you have in Canada. Our last toast is the other three leaders we met today, to Amanda Afonso, to Agam, and to Medina. So if we might have a toast to these fine leaders as well. Thank you very much. The Famous Five Foundation also thanks their teachers, to Sandrine Berezowski and Jim Reeder, for recruiting the girls and preparing them to participate in today's virtual pink tea. So Premier Cochran, former Premier Clark, and Kate Graham, thank you very much for inspiring us. I'm sure there are many, many more women who now think, I could be in politics too. So I know you're not going to go too far, because some of you are able to join us for the après pink tea, which will happen in just a few minutes. And again, please check your inbox for the special link. But I am going to ask the Encore crew to take the three of you off so you can relax for a moment. And I do apologize for any technical glitches we've had today. We're working with a new group, and clearly I should have spent more time preparing them, so my apologies. So first of all, our thanks to all of you who have written letters of support, phoned, spoken to people who are making decisions about the Afghan refugees, who have worked with our military or our charitable organizations and who want to come to Canada. A couple of days ago, 250 came to Calgary, came to Canada, but there are many more, particularly the very fine leaders that were the teachers, the organizers, the administrators with the Canadian charity called Canadian Women for Women Afghanistan. So thank you for what you've done, but continue to speak out. Secondly, on March 4th, not March 4th, I'm sorry, on February 4th, that's our virtual pink tea, our next one, you're going to meet three amazing women who are leaders in caring for the environment and also working to diminish the impact of climate change. Julia Langer, as well as Miranda Bikash, will be chatting with Ursula Serafini. So that's our next pink tea on February the 4th. And on March the 4th, we have the great honor of having one of the three people in Canada who hold the title Right Honourable. That is, we're going to be talking to the Right Honourable Mary Simon. So that's on March the 4th, our Governor General. I'm thrilled. Please join us. And on April 1st, we're going back to Christy Clark's country, to UBC, to chat with a professor called Suzanne Simard. Dr. Simard has written a book and has done extensive research, and as a result is challenging Charles Darwin and his theory of survival of the fittest. And she has written a book called Finding the Mother Tree. Now, this book was so popular prior to Christmas, it sold out, but it's in the reprinting, and she will be joining us on April 1st. And we've already got some amazing female leaders lined up for then May, June, and July. But if you have some ideas, some suggestions, do send them to us, because we read everything and we're very happy for suggestions. And while you're thinking about who else might be a speaker for us, think about what we might do for the 95th anniversary of the Persons Case. That's on October 18, 2024. We've got a committee set up now, so if you'd like to volunteer, that would be terrific. And thank you to all of those of you who have bought seasons passes. We hope that you will, those of you who haven't, those of you who have will join us for every single one. And those of you who haven't bought your seasons pass yet will do so in the next little while. I know you're going to be informed, inspired, and have a really pleasant time with us, even some chuckles. And now our last toast. And our last toast is to each and every one of us, because we all are leaders in the eyes of somebody, or for a number of you, for many, many people. So I would like you to say in a strong, clear voice, to me, I'm a leader too. And mean it. To me, I'm a leader too. So let's have your mug. To me, I'm a leader too. So the spirit of the Famous Five now is all within you. I hope you enjoyed today's program, and thank you very much for attending today and participating today. Please continue chatting in the chat room, or indeed check your inbox and join us for the après tea. Merci, merci, thank you, miigwech. A bientôt. Bye-bye.
Emily Murphy, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Louise McKinney, Irene Harleby, and Nellie McClung carved a place in the history of Canada's nation. The famous five changed the face of our land. They were born in a time that seemed so benign, when ladies were seen but not heard, fair of face and in their place, when meekness was mostly preferred. The five looked around, and everywhere they found the world revolved around men. They said we must fight what is not right, no matter who we may offend. Five women united, and united we're strong. Five women said, now we've begun. They rallied the nation for all generations and fought till the battle was won. Women wanted a voice and a say in the choice of the matters affecting our land. They didn't believe they shouldn't achieve every right freely given to men. So arm in arm from the cities and farms, their voices joined and were heard. Hand in hand, the women of this land fought the fights, won the rights they deserved. Five women united, and united we're strong. Five women said, now we've begun. They rallied the nation for all generations and fought till the battle was won. And fought till the battle was won. Emily Murphy, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Louise McKinney, Irene Harleby, and Nellie McClung. Heroes of mine, the Famous Five.